I'm going to show you the real quick, easy method I have that I'm using to make masks. This is not my pattern, I got it from someone else, but we have a group of ladies that they're already cutting the fabric for us. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take and you're going to put the two pieces right side together, and then we have another piece of a interfacing that we're putting on top. So you're going to put that on top of one of the wrong sides of fabric. I like to pin my elastic in the corners just so I don't have to stop while I'm sewing and make sure it's lined up. So I pin them so where they're going to go exactly in the corners. And then I'm going to make it where it's going to be flat. And we'll come over here to this so it's not twisted. And then we'll come over to this other corner, pin it in that corner. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Now the method I'm using does not leave a pocket in it. I do not have a serger. I just have a plain sewing machine. But if you have a serger, you could serge the edges and then leave a pocket in the middle. So let me flatten this one out and come up to this corner. And when I make these, I like to take a whole bunch of them, pin them out one time, then I'll come and I'll have my stack and I'll just zip through sewing, then I'll sit and I'll flip them inside out, and then I go through all my steps. I like to do them in big stacks like that. It goes easier for me. So what I'm going to do now is I have them pinned in the corners. I'm going to start on one side. I'm going to sew. When I get right here to the corner of the elastic, I backstitch. I flip and I backstitch, but I'm going to go from here all the way around and up here. I'm going to leave about a 2-inch gap so that I can turn it right side out. It's going to get noisy while I do this. And I do not use a 5/8. I use about a 1/4 to 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then here's where I'm going to backstitch. That just makes sure that the elastic is sewn in well. You leave the needle down, you're going to flip up the pressure foot, twist it, then I take my pin out, and then I backstitch again, going in that direction. I'm going to finish doing this all the way around. More, and then I'll flip it. Take my pin out. Now what I like to do here, I don't trim, I only trim the thread that came off at that point. I don't trim all of these until the very end. But because we have this interfacing here and it gets kind of thick, I'm going to just trim the edges close to the seam, just on the short end. And then I'll cut on the corner a little bit like that. I normally have it in a bucket where I'll do that so I can catch all of them because I'm doing them all at once. Okay, now the next step that I do is I'm going to turn it right side out. And this is why you put your right sides together for those that don't sew much. But this is still simple, easy to do. And then you just start flipping it right side out. And you're going to see how we've got the elastic in the corners. And this is just one method of doing masks. There's several different ways. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make 3 pleats on the short end. And this is where it gets thicker and harder to sew. I always flip mine around while I'm doing it because being right-handed, I like to pin a certain way from right to left. I'm just comfortable with it that way. So I've got 2 on this side. I'm going to come over to this side. And they don't have to be exactly even. And then my last pleat. And this side. So now what we are going to do is we're going to come in and top stitch. And on the long edges, I like to stitch kind of close, and then on this I'll come in probably about a 1/2 inch from the end and stitch. And I find sometimes if I pump the pedal to the sewing machine, it helps it along when I get into those thick spots. And because I don't leave the flap when we get to this section here, let me see if you can should see, I just make sure that those are folded in so that when I stitch on top, the opening, then it won't ravel. And then sometimes I help it along. Now flip and a turn, and start doing that a little bit to kind of help it go along because it gets really thick. And then I flip to do the long edge. And this is the side with the opening, so I just make sure that it's all closed up so there's no raw edge. And we're getting close to the folds again, or the pleats again. Flip it. And I'll turn for the last one. Just that. I'm going to take my pins out, and then on the short ends along the pleats, I'm going to go through these again, and I'm going to back stitch at the top and the bottom, and that just reinforces that one more time, so when they're used and washed, it'll hold up. And then the other side. I don't go through and trim all of these threads until the very end when I have a whole stack, and I'll do a whole bunch, and I'll do them all in sequence, and then I can go sit on the comfy couch and trim all the threads all at one time. So that's how easy it is to make the mask.